I started with ballet in school, in high school. And then when I was looking for a school to study, I went to all the schools downtown, and all the white schools weren't taking black youngsters. And so my mother remembered that Sydney was a ballet dancer with the Esther Marie Dorsey School, and that I had gone when I was 7 or 8, which I didn't remember. And she said she thought Sydney was teaching. And when she located it, was Sydney and Marion together. The Sydney Marion building was located in the African American community itself on Broad and South Street. And I think my first year there, they stayed together and then they separated. And Sydney stayed there, and Cuyjet moved into Center City, where I'm sure they told you she passed to rent this facility, and they got kicked out because they found out she was black. And so she moved around quite a bit, and Sydney stayed there on Broad Street for years. She was from Jamaica. She was a Jamaican lady.
Marion Cuyjet, who was my teacher, who created Judawar School of Dance. This was the first black woman to be able to rent space in downtown Philadelphia because she had green eyes, white skin, and red hair, and she was black. We would get kicked out of different schools because all these little black children would come running after this white woman in these studios that were being rented. Then they would figure out, no, that's not going to happen. So we moved several times. But it was because of her structure of Judawar School of Dance, the structure that she created of discipline, of love of what you do, of being correct, having the discipline of dance was very important for her to convey to us. And she was an incredible teacher.
Marion Cuyjet was my first teacher at Judawar School. And that was absolutely a miracle to have been selected for that scholarship. But she insisted on the language and that you had to pronounce the French terms. We didn't make up other words for the terminology. And my first ballet book, I still have it. I have my very first ballet book. It's all ripped up. The back is broken. But it was a book written by Lincoln Kirstein and Muriel Stewart called Classical Ballet. It's a rectangular book. And it has wonderful drawings and how to pronounce the French terms. I never took a ballet class at Judawar School with English.
The split was, I don't know if it was about color or if it was about the two ladies disagreeing, but they did definitely split. And I know that all of us little brown girls stayed with Sydney, and all the little light-skinned doctors and lawyers and all the so-called society girls went with Miss Cuyjet. That's why I was surprised that she ended up with Dolores, but she found them already trained in South Philadelphia at that Barrett School, I believe. Juanita, Dolores, and Alice, the three girls that were her stars, came out of that school. Billy Wilson, Betsy Ann Dickerson, Barbara Harper, all of us kind of stayed with Sydney. But those girls were a little bit lighter than me, so they stayed there with Sydney, and all of them did well. Now, I think when they separated, then Marion, pursued ballet more so than Sydney, because I think Sydney felt she had it. I know that I used to get to school early, and Miss Sydney, as we call her, would teach Miss Marion what she had to teach in her class.
Marion Cuyjet was a disciplinarian. She was an amazing teacher. She was so amazing that I didn't realize by the time I started teaching when I was 14, because she had a system where you would teach the younger ones, that I was so strict, almost no one could learn because I expected you to be as serious as I was about what I was doing. She put the seriousness of dance, the discipline of it, and how you have to be more than 100% doing what you're doing in class. She put that in your heart and in your spirit and in your soul. She also walked around with a stick, which she would never hit you with or anything like that, but it was the threat of the stick. And also, Marion cursed like a sailor. She really would let you know in certain terms that you were doing something not quite right. you knew that you had to be 200% for her. This is what I loved about her, because she took it seriously. She knew we were kids, but she still told us to approach every movement that we made seriously. And to this day, I still tell dancers that you can't take anything for granted when you're on the stage. Nothing. That came from Marion. She took care of us socially in that she would hold tea dances. We would have class, all that, but every now and then she would do literally a tea dance. And it would be in the afternoon, it would be maybe on a Saturday. You had to dress for it. And the guys that danced with you at these things should stay, they needed to stay a distance away from you when you danced. It was very proper, very, very proper. So there were manners being learned as if you didn't learn them at home. Of course, I did. But yes, you were learning social graces.
We all had on point shoes, and we shouldn't have had on point shoes, but we had point shoes on, and you struggled. And some of us found it easy and some of us didn't. But a lot of us were exposed to ballet.
Oh, shopping for point shoes and going to this one store, Balms, where Capezio was sold, and Duratoes, which are like iron booties on your feet. They were point shoes that literally, the only time I saw a point shoe that was harder than that was when I was in Israel, I think. That was even more boxier and harder than that. And the softest ones I ever saw were in Russia.
I love point work. I just thought it was the best thing. And I love the music. I love being in with the classical music. It was just, it was thrilling to me, every single class. My first pair of point shoes were Capezios for $5. And I thought that was a fortune. And I earned it by being an assistant. And I made $5 for that week for assisting Miss Marion with the little children, teaching the class.
When I went to Sydney's, coming out of the high school, I knew a little bit more than the rest of the kids. So I had the opportunity to be instrumental in encouraging and coaching a lot of the others. I was taking the money in the office, teaching, cleaning, teaching, cleaning, and teaching, because then that way my mother didn't have to pay.
When we became junior teachers and assistants, Miss Marion insisted that you pronounce the terms correctly.
And Miss Brown was one of my teachers. I'm talking about the great Dolores Brown. She was one of my first teachers.
Miss Marion wanted us to understand the technique, to really understand it. And her method for helping us understand what we were doing was to assist with the little kids and to see how you got to, say, turn out, or you got to extensions, or just the whole structure by using a little person who was just starting out. Judith Jamerson was in my first class that I taught, and there were 8 little girls, and they were wonderful. They really were. I mean, I got kind of an easy one for my first class to teach. But Miss Marion paid attention very much to what we were doing. We weren't just thrown in there as little 14, 15-year-olds to teach what she called her babies. No, she watched what we did, she watched how we did it, we were supervised. And for me, it gave me a wonderful skill set. Not only that I used many years later and a lot in my life to teach myself, but how to figure out why I could do what I was doing. Because I started in junior high school with the club, and it was not technical.
Dolores Brown is teaching another disciplinarian. She learned it from Marion Cuyjet. Dolores looked to me, she carried herself the way a ballerina carries herself. That was my image. That I could see every time I went to class. The way the straightness of her back, the pride of her carriage, the way she walked, the way her point shoes were tied, the way she carried herself when she was teaching us with pride, and she knew what she was talking about. She knew how to correct us. She knew how to keep us in line gently.
Well, I remember a lot about Judy. I remember she was bright. She was very quick. That class was kind of a jewel anyway. But I remember also her posture as a child, and that came from her mother. Her mother was as tall as she is, very elegant, always called her Judith. We called her Judy, her mother called her Judith always. And I remember Mrs. Jamerson just having that incredible posture and elegance and way. I mostly saw her mother because I saw her father at recitals, but her mother brought her. Of course, she was 8 years old. And then she was helpful to me years later when I came to New York. She was in the Mothers Club, and they were the ones to collect the money to give me the transportation to go to School of American Ballet. Marion Cuyjet, she was more in the Russian method of teaching. She liked strength. She liked these kind of what I would describe as a square way of teaching. You don't cut any corners. You were not allowed to cheat on any shapes. She started out with bar work like usual. And at that point in Judamar's history, we always had live music. We had live music for ballet. We had a pianist. You had live music for tap classes. We had Dunham. You had a whole bunch of drummers for the Dunham. So my experience before I came to New York was always live music. I never danced in a class with a record player.
Horton technique connected to my ballet because I'd had ballet the most. I'd also had Dunham because Marion taught Dunham technique. I also tap danced, thank God. I studied a lot of different techniques of dance when I was at Marion. So when I got to Horton, Horton just sat well in my body. It just, all of a sudden, it was a revelation.
The emphasis was more on overall dancing and not having a specialty. So Miss Marion and Mr. Hines gave us jumping, big jumping like the boys. What was I, 15? Miss Marion came and registered us at what was called Ballet Arts in Carnegie Hall. And of course we came like a lot of different dancing schools across the country. They come to New York for the summer program. She's a black woman who looked white. And so she registered us. She got all of our programs. So we had our punch card and everything. We were the first black people to ever study at Ballet Arts. And so the other girls arrived, and Miss Marion actually took classes with us because she wanted us to feel safe. No boys would come behind us. So Miss Marion said, we will partner each other, we'll alternate. So she made us, I think it was 6 or 8 girls, I don't remember now. But we got behind each other. We couldn't do because we didn't know how to hold somebody up. And we were all petite, so we weren't strong enough. And she said, we'll go back and show our boys, and then we'll do the whole class when we get home. Well, we were just hurt. We were crushed. We'd never had anybody treat us like that. And the next week we went back, and the best man in class got behind me.
The cotillions were the brainchild of Eugene Wayman Jones, and it was at the convention center. I always felt like it was the Ice Capades, these big extravaganzas, and the waltzes where he'd have 50 couples doing a waltz. He was a genius, he was a genius. And he gave out wonderful awards to Marion Anderson and Pearl Buck, so that there was an attraction. But all we had to do was create this ballet, and each school had a section. And my section, Billy Wilson and I would always, and Betsy Ann Dickerson, we'd always have our section. And, we'd all run in together and trip up and down that hallway. I parade from one end of the convention hall to the other, on cement.
The Philadelphia cotillions were a real extravaganza. I mean, they were produced. I remember Mary Bethune once was an honored guest. I can't even remember all the different people. Mrs. Roosevelt was one of the honorees. We had a full orchestra. It was the men of the Philadelphia Orchestra plus other men because at that time it wasn't women. You notice I said men. We didn't have women in the orchestra. We had wonderful costumes, and we normally had two schools did the ballet part of it. It was always a theme. It was Sidney King's school and Judah Marsh School were the pool of dancers. It was absolutely, I think I did the Ice Princess the very first year. I did three of them, three or four of the cotillions. And there was a man named Gene Wayman Jones. I don't know why that came to mind. He was the producer. He also was the producer of the Drama Opera. And he just, I mean, it was really quite a production, and we always did it in a huge space, stadium type space. So we were not properly on a stage, and it was floats and pageantry, and it was quite spectacular.
I was in deep competition with Dolores Brown. She was the ballerina at Judamar, and I was the ballerina at Sydney's, and we were always trying to out-ballet each other.
The cotillion, Sidney King and Marion Cuyjet, fabulous teachers in Philadelphia, would get together and put these incredible ballets inside of these cotillions. The cotillions were the coming out parties for Black society. So you'd get all these, debutantes and tails and the whole thing, and going up and down the spectrum. Huge stadium where they played basketball and all that. And they put ballets on the floor. Huge space. I mean, huge space. When I think of it, you couldn't see who the person was all the way over on the other side. And they would put the two schools together and create a ballet, and we danced for that one evening. Huge, huge space. I remember one year Joan Crawford was the honorary guest, and she was way back on the stage behind us, and I think we got a chance to see her maybe once come from the stage to the floor, but that's how far away was it. You going, is that Joan Crawford? That's how far away it was. But huge events every Christmas. We'd learn these ballets, get on that floor. I don't know how many hours of rehearsal we had, and then we were on. We were on. And we looked forward to it every year. It was wonderful. I'm smelling it. There's huge air in stadiums, right? It's huge air. So it's different than being in a small theater or a normal sized theater. There's different air there. It feels different. There's huge amount of space, and you can feel it. Feels great.
When I stopped dancing myself and I went to Sydney, she was, I say that, I don't say she's selfish, but she held back, and she wasn't interested in me having a school of my own. So I went to Miss Cuyjet, and she opened the books to me and told me the things that I should do to have a school of my own. So, and that was surprising because I wasn't her student. But she was the only other person I knew that had a dance school in the Black community. So I asked her, what do you do? Well, I knew what I did at Sydney's, but I wanted to know what she did. So she did. She showed me how she kept her books. She showed me what she did. But I knew some things about production from working in show business, so I just used what I knew and what I could gather from them and keep moving. Sydney didn't want us to leave. She wanted us to stay. And, we wanted to go. We wanted to do more. I differed with Miss Sydney somehow because the things that she wanted, I didn't want. I wanted to push kids. I wanted to move them out. I wanted them to move up. I wanted to make sure they were well-rounded. I didn't want to keep them and say that this was a kid at my school. And I think they didn't graduate from my school and become just a teacher, that there were other opportunities. I wanted to have a company. I wanted to just do other things. And I think she's still, even though she's 97 years old right now, I think she still talks about her kids, her dancers, and I just say, they're gone. They're doing other things. And I think that was the difference with Marion. She wanted to push her people out and help them become more than they were. I felt that Sydney was the better ballet dancer, the better ballet teacher, but she didn't have, as the old people say, the gumption to move forward and push people and reach out and do more. I think she was satisfied with what she knew and what she could teach and what she could give. And whereas I would say Miss Cuyjet wanted to do more and expose her dancers to more and it could be more, I think she wanted to be more credible. And Sydney was just satisfied with what she knew and what she could do.
Ballet never disappoints me. I still love it as much as the very first day, first performance I ever got to see, which was Margot Fontaine at the Academy of Music in the Rose d'Age. I will never forget that my whole life. So ballet doesn't disappoint me. What's disappointed me is that there's been no step forward. I also want people to understand, particularly ethnic people of every stripe, when you step into the ballet world, you belong there. You are not visiting, you belong there.
Well, I think it's important that Black ballet history is told. There's so many artists who have gone by the wayside that unless you tell the story, we won't know who they are. And young people won't know who they are.